When I see a bunch of NBA stars investing in the same thing, Carmelo, Trae Young, Klay Thompson, I get interested. But then when I find out that Jeff Bezos, Drake, and Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian are also in the deal, then I know we need to make a video. Hannah, do you think highly of the NCAA?
It's not my favorite organization.
I think it's maybe not as corrupt as FIFA, but it's like one of those institutions where you're like, man, this just doesn't make any sense anymore.
At all. It doesn't serve anyone.
Except for the administrators.
Big facts.
Some of the best NBA prospects are already skipping college and participating in the NBA G League, which is like their minor league system, able to get paid, get coached, and play against NBA or near NBA caliber athletes. And that's them kind of bypassing this very arcane, I would just say like antiquated and outdated model, because if you think about some past where there wasn't social media, where everything was on paper as opposed to digital, it's actually really hard to know who the best players in the country were. And that's why college basketball was so exciting, because you had this consolidation of talent and a kind of filtering mechanism for which you could identify the best players.
Yeah, it was pretty easy to identify the best prospects. And now, as you said, in today's day and age where people are not just skipping collegiate athletics, but people are skipping college in general, it makes sense. Like, college is no longer the fast track way to the big leagues.
Facts. So between the NCAA opening up the ability for players to potentially monetize their likeness, stuff like this G League alternative to attending college, going overseas like Brandon Jennings did a decade ago before being drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks, all sorts of opportunities are popping up as an alternative to college. But what we haven't considered, and what Overtime, a company that just raised $80 million at a $250 million valuation, that's $250 million.
$250 million.
Is suggesting is that there's even more underutilized, undervalued athletic assets in the form of high school age competitors. They raised that capital from some big names. Jeff Bezos, Drake, all sorts of different NBA stars like Carmelo Anthony and Kevin Durant, with the premise that a new high school league that takes the best high school players can compensate those athletes $100,000 a year plus insurance benefits, give them a larger stage, better competition, perhaps potentially better coaching, and help them create more financial outcomes earlier in their lives, and to some way, shape, or form, hedge whatever risk the improbability of making it to the NBA looks like, and build a brand in the process.
It's a great idea. We deliver you these great ideas and these interesting stories here on the Piper Rundown, where we analyze business and culture to help you win.
If you like stories about huge funding rounds, IPOs, big tech business strategy, then you're going to want to not only hit subscribe, but also ring that bell so that you can catch every new episode Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, hosted by me, Aaron Watson.
And me, Hannah Phillips. I think that worked. Interesting. Leave a comment if you enjoyed that new approach to the rundown intro.
So Overtime, it got on my radar a couple years ago for two reasons. Number one, they started dropping some really cool highlights on Instagram. I already followed House of Highlights and ESPN there, and it was just another source for highlights. But it was highly focused on these young athletes. So Zion Williamson was kind of like the breakout #1 star of Overtime. But there's also Mac McClung and these other athletes that you otherwise wouldn't know. But there's that feeling of, you know, if I could have watched LeBron when he was in high school, that would have been more entertaining, candidly, than some NBA games where they're, you know, going through the motions when, you know, the Timberwolves and someone else are throwing rocks at one another. And folks are in that have that same type of appetite, and they just generally have an interest in being, or it's like the people that like the band before the band goes big, yeah. Like the rapper before they go mainstream. Yeah. People are basically looking for that with their NBA stars. And Overtime was founded by two William Morris Endeavor agency people. So the one guy, Dan Porter, was the head of digital for all of William Morris Endeavor. And the other co-founder, Zach Weiner, was on his team in that digital division. And they basically recognized that number one, consumption of sports games was changing drastically. People were looking down at their phones. They weren't watching the whole game. They were just looking for the highlights. Those highlights weren't coming from ESPN. They were coming from social media clips. And there's this massive competition. We've talked in previous episodes of the show about DAZN buying up all the international rights for these different sporting events. We've got Amazon jumping into the game, competing with the largest cable providers for NFL games. And there's this competition for what was understood to be the core asset of these sports leagues. Their games over the course of a regular season, into the playoffs, package all sorts of sponsorships around that. You have a really, really nice business. Overtime basically says, okay, we come in the least capitalized, the least brand equity. Where can we go that is fundamentally undervalued? And it's these high school games.
It's a brilliant business model, and it's so niche. Definitely an untapped market, but it's so easy to generate that type of content because, like, there are people, like just those old geezers in town, who go to every single local high school basketball game because they like to see the kids who stick out, who are going to make something of themselves. And nowadays, with kids constantly filming and taking high quality photos at these games and at these sporting events, the content is user generated.
And there's also like the Ball is Life brand, evidence of the appetite that people have for these larger than life young personalities. And all these stars are already social media savvy. So it's not these other characters like I think we'll think of someone like Kawhi Leonard as this like relic of the past where he was so private, so not sharing, so not like into the social media scene. And meanwhile, LeBron and basically all of the characters that have followed him, Kevin Durant, super online, super willing to build a platform, use that platform, see the downstream effects of already having that platform for shoe deals, for other brand sponsorships. And Overtime's pitch to these athletes, I would say less so than the maybe rate at which they'll improve it as players, which is really more predicated on like your personal training, your time in the gym, stuff like that, is really, we can turn you into a star. Mac McClung is not a name I would have known if not for Overtime. And they were highly engaged with that character's growth. And they're now also in a position, not necessarily that they want to do this, but to become the managers, to become the agents, to create those agency connections to those young players who are on the rise. And then further, you have all this investment from NBA stars who went through that process of being like, yo, I wasn't able to monetize until I was 21, but I was better than everyone when I was 17 years old, 16 years old. Why can't that be a monetizable opportunity? It's a really fascinating idea. And this Dan Porter character that's the CEO is freaking legit. So I looked at his back catalog. He helped start Teach for America. He was the president of Teach for America and started it for the first 4 years of that program.
Holy, wow.
He then went on to found OMG Pop, a social gaming platform that he sold for $180 million to Zynga.
Yikes.
And then after that became the head of digital for William Morris Endeavor. I think it was as soon as his earnout was over at Zynga, he was like out. And saw this opportunity and is now literally, like his line when he's interviewed about this, they're trying to build the largest sports media network on the planet. That's their explicit goal. So the aspiration is large. You get Drake in your corner, you get Bezos in your corner, you get these NBA stars in your corner. It's not impossible.
No,
I'm not saying I'm betting on it, but another thing that jumped out to me is Digiday did a report on their last round of funding. So this is a Series C. In their last round of funding, this is a very like inside media type of metric. They have an understanding of a cost to their enterprise to produce 1 minute of video.
Okay.
When folks are quoting, let's say in a market like Pittsburgh, for something like a documentary, that could be $1,000 a minute, upwards $1,500, maybe even $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 if we're talking about like animations and other things like that. That's how production companies kind of think about production from a cost basis. He said in an interview on their last round, $500 a minute, so half of what these standard production firms would assess, and their goal is to go no higher than that. So they're also, when you talk about the pace of the internet, the style of the internet, the ability to keep these costs constrained and not have some undue editorial burden for getting stuff approved, they think in those terms, and I would guess, I don't know for sure, but a lot of other media entities would struggle to bring their number down like that. And so if you're not paying for rights, but you're not paying the same costs of production, you have this ability to compete in spaces that other media entities can't even get to.
And just make more and more and more. Yeah.
Facts. And the other thing I thought that you'd get excited about is they also mentioned NFTs. I don't know if that's PR sprinkle or if that's legit.
Wow.
But in terms of future monetization and these players playing in their new league, you could create NFTs out of all those different highlights that they can sell, share in the equity of, and with the growth of sports gambling, I don't see why someone wouldn't gamble on a high school game if they're already gambling on college and NBA games.
Yeah, that's pretty epic. Very cool.
Epic indeed. Less cool, South by Southwest having to sell.
Yes, they sold 50% stake to Penske Media Group, PMRC Holdings, which is majority run by Penske Media Group.
Do you recognize his last name Penske? I think that's one of the most interesting things about this.
I don't.
It's one of the largest automotive groups. They own the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
What?
It's a publicly traded company that's valued between $6 and $7 billion market cap. His dad founded the company. Jay Penske runs the media group. So it's very interesting when you read that. I'm sorry, we're going way off a digression here. You go to his profile, there's no reference to the Penske automotive group at all. And then if you even go to his Wikipedia, it's his background, and they clearly have a PR person doing this.
Yeah.
His mother was a school teacher, and that's the beginning of the sentence, and then that same opening sentence mentions his dad was the the founder of Penske, but then it ends on a different idea. So if you're not reading for comprehension, you would not immediately grasp that he's the son of a billionaire.
Wow, what a way to spin that. Just spin your family's legacy. That's so,
what you gotta do.
I guess. It's interesting.
I mean, if you're trying to make a name for yourself, I understand the impetus to do that.
For sure.
But still, that's the moves that PR people do.
Wow. Fascinating. Well, Penske is picking up 50% of South by Southwest. If you're not familiar, South by Southwest is a tech, movie, and music festival that is held in Austin every year. It's been profitable for the last 10 years. They bring on average around $100 million in revenue. South by Southwest kind of confuses me because it's trying to be everything all at once. I mean, there are huge names that show up there every year. Huge performers, huge keynote speakers. I think they're getting Matthew McConaughey this year to give his little all right keynote speech. But
I mean, it has concentric circles outwards. So there's I've gone once, and there's the event space with the panels and the talks, but then all the tech companies now, they all rent houses, throw parties.
Yeah.
I was at a party that Ludacris performed at that I guess some people knew. I didn't know that was going to happen.
Right.
But it was just some tech company trying to flex, trying to bring people to their party versus someone else's.
Yeah.
But they all have houses, and that's the game when you're in a place like that. Obviously not possible in a pandemic.
Yeah, it's the social game. And last year, obviously, they struggled a lot with the COVID shutdown.
And their insurance didn't cover a pandemic.
Yes, which I guess Wimbledon is the only major event that actually had a pandemic built into their insurance. I don't know, policy, but
I'm not sure. I feel like there was a timing thing there too, where Wimbledon was still at that beginning where that's all anyone wanted to talk about, and so it got those headlines. I'm sure there was another entity that had it, but Wimbledon is about as high prestige. We don't really care that name some random ass tennis tournament had an insurance policy that covered it. It's just not the same story.
Exactly. But yeah, South by Southwest,
The Miami Open or something.
was hurting a lot last year, and they're going all virtual this year, which certainly will not be the same, but trying to pick it up, trying to inspire and innovate, I guess. I don't know.
A lot of PR sprinkles.
Yeah.
Speaking of PR, McDonald's super savvy move, following up the Travis Scott meal with a BTS-centered meal. I don't know how much of this, once again, was PR or not. Maybe I'm becoming too cynical, but the Travis Scott meal at McDonald's was such a success, they were running out of its core ingredients. And see, like, I don't know if that's like Apple, like only making so many of like the new device so that it sells out, so that they can tell you it sells out, so that you have that feeling of scarcity. But they're apparently making preparations for the same thing to happen with BTS, which is a fantastic way to set people up for that narrative to land when it drops in May. But I'm curious to see what it'll be. I'm curious to see if there'll be like different parts of it associated with the different members of the group. But damn, just a big old win for Korea.
Big win.
And McDonald's. McDonald's, they need a dub. I'm hopeful that this works out for them.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a rundown. Leave a comment if you found this information valuable, helpful. We do this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Unless we get tired.
Have a great weekend.